Okay. Do I need to record or anything?
No. I just record here, and it sends it sends your file to me.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't just one kid standing on another kid.
You're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast with me, Giles Bidder, and I'm excited to say that I've got Brendan Kelly here from the Lawrence Arms to talk about their new record, Skeleton Coast, to talk about some of the jobs that he's worked and how he kind of domesticated himself halfway through their career. And when they started, you'll hear in a second, but they were kind of basically full-time when they started because they were touring so much. It was great to hear about that, and then how he transitioned from that into working and being a dad, then eventually getting into advertising, working at The Onion, and then doing his Nihilist Arby's thing, which is still genius. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers and supporting live music since 2011. You may know them from their collaboration beers brewed with the likes of Mastodon, Idols, which is the episode before this with Mark Bowen, fascinating guy, Slaves, Mogwai, Enter Shikari, and loads more. And as a listener to 101 Part-Time Jobs, as a coveted listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off all the beers from their website at signaturebrew.co.uk using the code 101podcast at checkout. That's 101podcast, all capital letters, at checkout for 10% off all the beers of signaturebrew.co.uk. Here's Brendan Kelly from the Lawrence Arms. I hope you enjoy as much as I did. How you doing? You've done a lot of interviews then for Skeleton Coast.
You know what? Actually, it's not been too crazy. But I just did do one just now. Sorry I'm late. But yeah, I mean, we've done a few, but it hasn't been too overwhelming.
And has that changed? I mean, in terms of where we find out about new music from, that's changed so much over the last 15 years. I mean, what's it been like on the other side?
It sure has. I mean, it used to be we'd put out a record and, the interviews would just be kind of nonstop. But I mean, I think music journalism in general is taking kind of a hit, and
definitely
the way people consume things on the internet, like long form things, stuff of that nature, is maybe not as popular as it used to be. And as a result, yeah, or maybe people just care less about us now. I don't know. It could be that too. I don't think that's the case because we have bigger shows than ever. But
right, and every time you come to London, it's an event.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm glad. I love me some London, man. We love coming there. And so yeah, I think it's probably more just like a state of like how the public consumes music and what they want to hear about it, because when you could just go and listen to the record for yourself, there's not as much reason to like read up on something and be like, do I want this?
I remember getting Spotify for the first time and being like, holy shit, this is the best thing ever. And then a few years later, kind of actually thinking about it, using my brain and being like, oh, this is actually potentially incredibly damaging.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it goes both ways because like, I think a band of like our size, yes, damaging. But for like small bands, it's great because it gives people an opportunity to listen to something that they might not otherwise listen to. And people that are very, very popular make a dick ton of money off of Spotify, but if you're a band in the middle, it's rough, for sure. But, what are you going to do, man? Like, I might as well bitch about the sun coming up in the morning,
Right. I mean, that makes me think, how good are you crunching the numbers in the Lawrence Arms?
We just got to make music, man. And, when back in the day, we used to go on tour and there would be money at the end and that would be good. But like it's not like we have some sort of like balance sheet that we need to maintain or anything like that. We still operate very much like a punk band that, fucking those records when we want to, piles in the van when we can, plays as many shows as we feel we're able to, and see where it all nets out at the end. Like, we're not very business savvy, I guess would be a good way to put it.
When I started this podcast, obviously it's about, its namesake, and it's about the crappy part-time jobs that anyone would work between tours. And I'm speaking mostly from like, I guess, rock bands and punk rock bands specifically. But at some point that becomes synonymous with like your entire life. It's only the first couple of years that you like, it's a novelty of getting that kind of crap gardener's job. And then I feel like maybe on your second or third year of being in a touring band, you have to find some kind of stability in it. What's your kind of experience in that?
Well, so for a long time, when the Lawrence Arms started, it was my only job, right? And I know that sounds kind of weird, but that was back when like albums were selling and stuff like that. And I had been in a band before this called Slapstick that had done rather well. And then after that, a band called the Broadways, which didn't do as well, but they were still bands that put out records when people bought records. And so when the Lawrence Arms started, we had sort of like a little bit of a leg up in terms of being a new band and having people interested in coming to see us. And a lot of people didn't particularly like what we did, but enough people would come to the shows and enough people would buy the records that we were able to maintain a pretty shitty lifestyle with with a little bit of ease, you know what I mean? And we didn't have that, like when we were like really like hustling in the early days, we didn't come home to jobs because we didn't come home at all. Like we'd play like 350 shows a year, you know? And so we would just be out there just doing it. And it was only when my son was about to be born, he was born in 2008, that we came home from a tour and it was like, yeah, all right, I can't be gone all the time. I think we were burned out as well. And I don't think we knew what to do. And that's when I started getting fucking shitty jobs. And so the first job I got was the Metro is a big club in Chicago. It's like where we play when we play here. I got a job as a loader, like a stagehand and a loader, and then a stage manager at Metro, which was great because there'd be people that'd be like, hey, my band used to open for your band, and now here you are carrying my shit up the stairs. It's literally something someone said to me. And I was like, all right, you know, and then I don't remember why I fucking left that job. Fuck, I really don't, because I liked it. But eventually I walked into a bar. I think we went on another tour, and then they were just like, yeah, you know, it's a slow season. We don't need you back or whatever. And I went to this bar. My friend Katie was working, and she was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I like no longer have my job. And, you know, I'm just fucking, I got no tours on the horizon. And she was like, you bartend, right? And I was like, oh yeah, totally. Always bartending. Yeah. I'm big bartender. She's like, yeah, we're hiring a bartender right now. And so I talked to the guy right there, and I was like, yeah, I bartended at this place, which I'd never bartended in my life before. And the guy was like, oh yeah. I think he could tell I was bullshitting him, because he goes, like, during the interview, which, like, I walked in there for a beer. I did the interview with a beer in my hand. I wasn't expecting to have a job interview at that point. The guy goes, well, you kind of got me over a barrel because I really need a bartender. So come back tomorrow and start. And I was like, all right, great. And so then I became a bartender, and I did that there for a bunch of years.
And this is 2008, 2009, you say?
Yeah.
So O Calcutta had come out, and O Calcutta is easily one of the best Fat Wreck records of that period of time, in my opinion.
Well, thanks, man.
Did that ever was that like a bit of a cross to bear, I suppose? Is that a weird question? You know, was that kind of riding on your shoulders, the fact that, you know, you were in a band that people love?
Yeah, man, it was weird. And it was like a little bit embarrassing, I guess. Not that there's fucking anything wrong with having a job. But like, you know, I had for so long, lived on being a touring musician. And so a lot of my peers were also people that live off being touring musicians, and they would come to town, and they would like come to the North Side, which is the name of the bar I worked at. And I'd just be like, hey dude, you know, yeah, how's the road? And it wasn't that I was embarrassed that I had a job, and it wasn't that I was like jealous of people that, you know, were able to continue to do this. Because I mean, like, again, by the same token, I just had a new kid, but it all factored into the same thing, which was like, I've become like domesticated, and like I spend my days dealing with babies, and then I go to my work, which was something that was very foreign to me. And so it's like when all of a sudden like Brian Fallon comes in, he's like, I told you I'd show up even if you couldn't be at the show. And I'm like, oh, hey, man, fuck. Not only did I miss your show, but here I am bartending, making chocolate martinis for these ladies or whatever.
Because there's that whole thing. I've worked at a couple of like festivals and stuff. And, if you're playing it, you're the talent with a capital T. You know what I mean? Did you ever like buy into that?
Nah, man. It's the guy that serves you beer is way more important than the guy on the stage. 100% of the time. Like if if you don't believe me, consider this. Take one of them out of the equation. Which place are you still going to go? You know what I mean? like, are you going to go see a band with no bar, or are you going to go to a bar where there's no band? I think it speaks for itself. Like maybe on a rare occasion, you'll go to see a show where there's no fucking bar, but you go to bars where, like, if I go to a bar and there is a band, I'm like, ugh, man, maybe we should go to another bar. I don't necessarily need to see this fucking band. And I don't have to know and love the bartender to sit down at a bar and have a good time. I have to really fucking know the band to fucking go there and have a good time, especially if there's no beer. So I don't believe in that shit at all. I mean, I understand, artists are kind of elevated to put on some sort of pedestal because people really connect to the art, but something I talk about a lot is that without those people connected to it, it doesn't mean jack shit. You could, take fucking Radiohead and put that music out in 1955. Nobody gives a fuck about Radiohead. Radiohead's not good. Radiohead's not important at all. Fucking that dude with the weird eyes. He's working at a bar. You know what I mean? And he's making a lot more money and more people respect him at that point, and he could put out the exact same songs. It's just like the art's not really important at all. It's the people that connect with it that make it important. So,
right.
And there's a whole thing with like, a trend in like big festivals now is that certain bands will put up pictures of themselves backstage and they'll be like, these guys are not going to wear the fucking wristband, or they're not going to, carry the laminate. Get to know their faces. Do not stop them, and it's like, fuck you. Like that, you're there's like all these fucking security guys here. And
you mean like there'll be a picture of the singer of, I don't know, Muse, and they'll be around backstage saying, none of the people working security question this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, you couldn't fucking carry a laminate, so you're gonna make these 35 backstage security guards who are put here for your fucking safety and comfort. You're gonna make their fucking job like 10 times more miserable. Just because like you can't carry a fucking laminate in your pocket. Lick a dick, man. It's like the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The entitlement that people seem to tend to feel just because like they're lucky enough that some people like their songs is kind of fucking ridiculous to me. Nobody that I really fucking particularly know or like very much, but I've definitely seen that exact thing with like the fucking get to know these dudes' faces at festivals where I'm like, who the fuck is this band? I don't even know this fucking band, or like, or people like, I remember this when I was working at Metro, there was this fucking band that played, that I'm not going to say who they are, but I really liked them very much. And the dude started fucking losing his mind because they wouldn't give him a bottle of Jack Daniels from behind the bar. And they're like, you have hospitality backstage. Like, you can get a bottle of Jack Daniels. We just can't give you one from behind the bar. And he started fucking throwing a like, you know who I am kind of fit. And it was like, motherfucker, you're not even the headlining band tonight. Like, what are you doing? So, I mean, I've definitely seen it, and it's kind of disheartening for sure. But most people aren't like that, that's the good thing.
Do you think people have? I remember. So we met briefly before Ollie put you on down here in Deptford, and we met at the Bird's Nest, that pub with the smoking area outside.
Oh yeah.
And you told me, like, I was asking you questions about Calcutta and stuff, and you said when you were touring with Taking Back Sunday, where you were headlining that tour, and they were just coming out with their first album, that there was loads of people in the parking lot. They were for Taking Back Sunday and not you. I'm not saying that to be a dick. I'm saying that because I guess there's probably this misconception when a band starts touring a lot and starts releasing records that it's kind of plain sailing from there. And it feels like everything I've read about you and heard from you, that Lawrence Arms, it's always been up and down.
Well, I think less than it's been like up and down for us. It's been a slow rise. And I think been a slower rise than it's really hard to look back now. Like we're a very popular band and like we pack big rooms and stuff like that. But that's new, like that wasn't the case for a really long time. And, at that point, that tour was still a good tour for us, but it wasn't like being on a rocket to the moon, like Taking Back Sunday it was on, and so it's just like, when you're driving fucking 45 miles an hour on the highway, somebody's going to blow past you at 70 miles an hour at some point, and that's sort of how it was for us a lot. I mean, there's a lot of bands that we've toured with that have opened for us that have gone on to be very, very huge. And, but we're just like slow and steady and which is fine. I don't want to be in any of those bands. Like, I want to be in the Lawrence Arms, but yeah, it's not so much like, I mean, we got ups and downs in terms of like, Jesus fucking Christ, is this worth it? But then we always come back to like, yeah, what else are we going to do? And like, I like this. Do you like this? Yeah. Okay. So, you just kind of keep trucking, but yeah, that definitely did happen with Taking Back Sunday.
You put it really well on the Alkaline Trio podcast, as you were in you said, I paraphrase, but you say, like some bands have that lightning in a bottle and then it's like uphill from there, whereas you've kind of got better with every record.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's like, yeah, man, I think that the worst thing that could happen to you is to put out a perfect album first. Because then like you're going to be chasing that dragon for the rest of your career. Right. And, and the one thing that I feel like you should never do is go back and listen to your own old music for inspiration on how to write new music, which I feel like you just kind of have to do that if that's the kind of band you are, right? If you're have the fortune or misfortune, whatever you want to say, of having made that perfect record first, and that's like eating your own turds for nutrients, it's just going to be fucking diminishing returns at that point, Yeah. So like, You'll never do it that way, but I don't know how you would do it any other way if you are in the eye of a storm where everyone has said, man, that first record was fucking perfect. When are you going to get back to doing stuff like that? I feel like that would be very psychologically difficult to divorce yourself from. And so luckily for us, we put out a pretty rough first couple records, and then and we just are all students of like songcraft and stuff. We just sat there and we'd listen to it and be like, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And then we put out another record and we'd be like, okay, a little better, this works, this doesn't work, I don't know why we did this again, and then kept adjusting and sort of just like being sort of very mechanical about the art of it in terms of like, and studious, like really kind of taking notes on what works, what doesn't work, what we like in other things that we can bring in, I mean, that's also a big thing for us, is like being like, okay, I'm really into, on the new record, one of like Chris's coolest fucking guitar parts on the record is inspired by a Solange song,
Sick.
And And in that same song, I'm like kind of trying to channel MCA from the Beastie Boys, like in like my vocals, and then like in my lyrics, kind of channel Immortal Technique a little bit in like a kind of a twisted, weird way, you know. And it's like, and those kinds of things. And then there's other songs on there where I'm like, I want to write this like if Townes Van Zandt was a punk, you know. And I feel like that kind of stuff yields really cool results. But that's like trial and error over the course of, you know, a 20-year career, where it's like got to the point where it's like, oh, I have my own voice and anything that filters through me is going to sound like that. So why don't I try filtering something really weird through it and see what happens?
And you've tried some of those, that like weirdness on a guided tour, you know, that you try some different stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you feel pretty fearless. It seems pretty fearless.
Wait, on guided tour?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that, you know, that was obviously it's our first album and we didn't know what we sounded like at that point, really. But that was the point where, like, I think we were trying to differentiate from our old band, the Broadways, for one thing, and also to just do something that we felt like, that was the first time I feel like ever that I realized the real truth, which is you can make the kind of music you'd like to hear. A lot of times it's like a guitar player will write a part and it's like, oh, this is kind of a cool part. Okay, I'll do this 6 times. And then here's this other part. I'll do this 4 times. And then I'll do this 8 times. And it becomes like sort of a, like building an engine mechanical process. And then a singer will be like, oh, I can kind of sing over that. And then it like kind of works. And then you go, okay, that's a song. But there's not like a lot of thought into like, is this the kind of song I'd like to hear? It's more like, can we do it? You know, it's like that Jeff Goldblum in fucking Jurassic Park, where a lot of bands like spend so much time wondering if they could, they never take the time to wonder if they should. You know, and
yeah,
and like, and I think when, like, one of the things that like I think made Lawrence Arms special to me when we first came together was I was like, oh my God, we can do the kinds of things that I would like there to be in punk rock. And that like really came to fruition with O Calcutta when we sat down to write that record, and Chris and I were like, dude, let's make the record that we wanted to hear when we were 16, when we were listening to fucking 15 and Minor Threat and Naked Raygun and fucking Jawbreaker and Bad Religion. Like, what was the record that was not in our catalog? Let's make it, you know?
You say in that Dan Osley's got that really great article about you talking about all the records that Lawrence Arms have released, and you talk about how on O Calcutta you wanted to be as heavy as, say, like some of the Hot Water Music stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was, we'd come off of a Hot Water Music tour right before, like, we were writing that. And those guys were just so kind and great. And, you know, they just put out Caution, which I think is their best record. And I think it was like, you know, we had up to that point sort of like wild bursts of like stuff that was like purposely non-cohesive, I guess, you know, like, like my songs would be like very fast and short, and then Chris's songs would be longer and more like mid-tempo or whatever, for the most part, not always, but Hot Water Music, we were just like, man, like, and I think with no disrespect to Hot Water Music at all intended, I think we were like, see, like what they do, but we could do it like the right way, you know? And again, I love Caution. I love Hot Water Music. I love those guys, but like our way, which would be more what we want to hear, you know? And like we could make our own, like we can make our own fucking favorite album from when we were kids, you know? And I think that was a thing. I mean, when we put out that record, we very much were like, you know, all the, like, people like sit around and like at the time would say like, oh yeah, there's these fucking bands. There's like, Against Me, Dillinger 4, Hot Water Music. And then like the next tier down, it's like the Lawrence Arms. And we were like, no, that will not do. We're going to fucking put out a record that's better than any of those fucking bands' records. And, and it wasn't like, again, with no disrespect to those bands, it was just like, oh, you don't see what we're trying to do. We'll show you what we've been doing this whole time. And it was just like kind of part of that freedom of like figuring out what we wanted to hear and then just saying fuck it to literally everything else.
The Greatest Story Ever Told has so many like literary references, and it's pretty esoteric and studious in that way. With O Calcutta, because it's so much more rounded as a kind of pop punk record, did it concern you that you needed to kind of, I don't know, keep that up?
A huge part of Greatest Story is that a lot of that shit's made up. Like a lot of those footnotes, I just fucking completely made up. It's like my friends' names. Like Toby's credited as being like a sculptor from like the 15th century in the fucking footnotes and shit. So it was more of like a universe building thing. That the idea there was like back in the day when you'd have like a lyric booklet and you'd like pour through it and it would be like every single thing created this like sort of theater of the mind. You know what I mean? And so we wanted to create this like fucking universe that you could just get completely lost in. It was never really an intentionality to be like perceived as like literary fucking Poindexter punk rock or anything like that. It was more just like this like creative journey that we were taking. We were creating like a world of fiction kind of almost more than anything. That said, there are a lot of references that are legit in those footnotes as well. And as people have pointed out, they're end notes, not footnotes, but whatever. The thing is, that's always been the fucking case. Like we always have done that. Like even on, Guided Tour of Chicago, it's like packed with like literary references and references to art and esoteric films and, pieces of pop culture ephemera and stuff like that. And, that continues on O Calcutta. O Calcutta probably has just as many references to that kind of thing as Greatest Story does. And definitely Metropole and Skeleton Coast both are continuing that vein. I'd say those are the two like more intellectual records of any of them, but yeah.
I've been done in by the artwork. Do you know what I mean? Those three characters that have made me read up about them more so than lyrics on O Calcutta that I haven't read up much about.
Right. Sure. And I mean, like, again, when we did Greatest Story, it was like, let's do this theater of the mind thing. Like we're, the whole thing is about a show that ends in disaster, right? It's about a circus that starts and it's not going very well and the whole place catches on fire, right? That's like the story of the record. And so it's like, let's draw people in and let's give them like a fucking program, and let's like unlock this like fucking universe for them to like fucking think about. And let's do that thing that when we were kids and we'd see like the name of like a producer that was on like two of our favorite records, we'd be like, oh, who's Kevin Army? What is that? What's it? What do you think Sam I Am sounds like? Shit like that, where it would just like become this like thing that would sort of take over and become its own thing. That's what we were doing there. With O Calcutta, we were like, let's do that fucking record we always wanted to hear when we were kids, and let's leave it all in the audio. That's why, like, for the first time, like since we've ever been a band, we, the liner notes were really minimal. We used our real names in there. Like it was just more like, let's just make a record that like really mirrors like that stuff. And so it was more to take you on a visceral ride than an intellectual ride. Right. But that's sort of our thing, is to kind of change that shit up, like with every record a little bit.
And I think the lyrics on Skeleton Coast, some of those lyrics are like the deepest Lawrence Arms lyrics that I've heard. I mean, there's a bit where it's like, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. And it's like, for me, that sums up this kind of, sad Joker element of the band.
Yeah. Well, cool, man.
It sounds so fucking good.
Thanks, man. The idea behind this record is, it's it's loosely based on the idea of like sort of living in an outpost at the end of the world, you know, kind of in wild isolation and, you know, kind of howling at the moon and finding your like small joys where you can in the midst of sort of desolation, right? Without trying to like beat you over the head with that idea. And I feel like on the record, I feel like it sounds like you can hear like the desolation, you can hear like the fucking self-flagellation and the self-doubt, but you can also hear the hope in it. You know, I feel like there's a real hopeful element in the record. I don't know. I mean, like, far be it from me to parse like what our record sounds like. I've kind of too close to it to really know, but
yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
The other line that really fucking got me on the first couple of listens is when Chris sings like, you know, kind of crutching, leaning on a lexicon of old, like, you know, being someone who was once something.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reflection in this, and I mean, isn't that the ultimate truth of the end of the world, right? If you can't look forward because there is no forward to look at, you can look back, but that would only be very painful, and it doesn't matter anyway.
Right.
You know? So it's like you can be like, I used to be somebody, but I don't think that there's like are you talking about Last Words? Is that the
I think so.
The song you're talking about?
I think so. I listened to the album like kind of from start. I didn't really look at my phone.
Yeah. I got you. But yeah, I don't think it's like I think it's like self-depreciating and like with a chuckle kind of way.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny because do you know that I heard that line for the first time and I thought that's like me saying sick. Like I shouldn't be saying sick at my age, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I think it's kind of like, yeah, man, I used to be somebody. Anyway, right. what are we doing later? You know, kind of shit. You know,
and in recording it, good friend Sam Russo was saying how you recorded it in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of great gear.
Yeah, dude, it was
guitar equipment gear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was crazy. Oh, you didn't mean our decks?
3 Stellar rigs.
Yeah, we recorded this with some great hogs. No, we did, man. This place was called the Sonic Ranch. It's outside El Paso. And, you know, for our friends across the pond, El Paso's in the middle of fucking nowhere already. It's a very isolated little city on the western border of Texas. So it's right by Mexico, and it's right by New Mexico, which is like Mexico but newer. And it's and so we fly into El Paso, which itself is like a small city, like I said, and then we drive about 45 minutes out, and it was a 3,000 acre pecan ranch that we recorded at. And to say that there was nothing around is kind of almost an understatement. Like, it was like 20-minute drive to get to a dollar store where you could buy like a bag of crisps and a beer. And like that was just like an isolated fucking like general store in the middle of fucking the desert, you know, and that was 20 minutes away. That's how in the middle of nowhere we were. I mean, we were surrounded by 3,000 acres of pecans at the studio, but the studio itself is like, it's like 7 little houses, and each of those little houses contain like the 7 nicest studios I've ever seen in my life. And then for each house, there's another house where you stay. So like we stayed in this little house. We could walk 500 feet across, you know, the dust, in the midst of all these pecan trees to the little house that had the studio in it. And the way it would go is, and we'd wake up in the morning, we would drive a mile through the pecans down to the main hacienda where they would, the ladies, as they were known, would make us breakfast burritos. And then we'd come back, and by like 10, we'd be in the studio recording. At like 3:30, the engineer assistants would bring lunch to our little house. We'd walk across the little dusty field back to our house, eat lunch, then come back and then work till night, where we go back to the hacienda for dinner. And then we'd come back and work, if we needed to. But often once we hit dinner, we were done. And so it was like being at album camp or whatever. But the other part about it that was so cool was that they have like this insane collection of classic vintage gear. I mean, just shit the likes of which you wouldn't believe. And I don't just mean like, it's like, not only like do they have like nice amps, which they have 7 fucking houses full of, but they also have like all these great vintage drum sets, all these fucking amazing, Les Pauls from the 60s, all these amazing fucking, jazz masters and Telecasters and fucking acoustic guitars. And then also effects pedals, keyboards, fucking vintage consoles, like it was just like, it was like being in a fucking, it's like being in a fantasy camp to make a record, really.
Wow. Great.
It was so cool.
Across the record, there's so many audio snippets of like farm animals going around, and that brings. I mean, it's just a little small thing, but I think it rounds the record up. I think it makes it like helps it be a good listening experience.
This is not the kind of thing that like in almost any other circumstance I would let this slide, but those are not farm animals. Those are wild animals. That's key. Yeah, they are coyotes, foxes, wolves, and whales. And those are like the 4 animals that feature prominently in the lyrics, right? And the idea is sort of like those are like fucking loner scavenger animals, that like howl into the nothingness, right? Like, a whale song is the same as a fucking coyote howling at the moon, is the same as the vixen cry of the fox, is the same as the wolf howling at the moon, right? And those were sort of the things that ended up becoming these prominent metaphors on the record. And so that's like in a large way why the fox is on the cover of the record, because, foxes are the sexiest ones. So we had to put a little cheesecake on the cover for you,
I mean, it's like I said, it sounds so good, and I feel like there are records where you can have the best gear as you can, but it doesn't, sounds whatever. Skeleton Coast just has this incredible like velvety sound. I don't know. I don't want to blow too much smoke up your ass. It sounds just so good. It's just my favorite bits of Calcutta, just really kind of owned in on. Yeah,
well,
it's great.
I appreciate that so much, and I was going to say that has a lot to do with Matt. I mean, like when he came down there. So we had this studio assistant named Mao. Dude, Mao is fucking a cool dude. He's from Mexico. He's been kidnapped by the cartels twice, apparently, just for being in a bar, sitting next to the wrong guy, and they like grabbed the wrong person. I don't know if I should be really telling his story, but this is a UK fucking thing, so I think it's probably fine. But motherfucker's name is Mao Castro, which is probably the most communist name that there is on the earth. So he would have been, if we had gone down there without Matt, he would have been the engineer, right? As it happens, we had Matt, and so Mao became the assistant, which meant that he would hook up, he would mic things. He would grab gear that we wanted. If we were like, oh, do you have like an old, like, what about like an authentic 1960s flange pedal? Oh yeah, I've got one of those in Studio 3, and stuff like that. But Excellent. Matt Allison would walk around, like when he walked in, he was like, holy fucking shit, and he was just like looking at things and he's like, oh, this is, and I mean, I'm completely making this part up because I have no like technical prowess whatsoever. But he'd be like, oh, this is like a GX 215 125. And you could tell it's 1962 because by 1963, they were using a different housing for the for the pedal, and Mao, who works there, who's like a fucking accomplished engineer in his own right, was like, where the fuck did you get this guy? Like, it's crazy, So Matt is like such a passionate nerd about that kind of shit. And I mean that in like the most like odd way. Like I'm awed by like his knowledge and just like encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. And so he would be like, I know what you need. Like, we'd be like, this sound, it's not quite right. He'd be like, let's do this. And just like fucking, ask Mao to go grab something or find something that was laying around. And it would be like, yep, now that's the exact sound we want, So I can't say enough about Matt's unbelievable contribution to the way the record sounds. I mean, obviously he's the engineer, he's the producer, but also in terms of just like having his time in his own personal candy store, he really made it happen.
Thanks, Brendan. It's been a great chat. I wanted to end it on, so kind of stay true to the namesake, is that, we all know about like the Nihilist Arby stuff and them flying you a puppy to say kind of thanks. I don't know. There's this kind of like ironic friendship there.
Yeah.
Did that kick off like kind of a new career for you? Because you're working with The Onion now, aren't you?
Well, no, The Onion kind of got destroyed. I mean, it still exists, but they had massive layoffs, and like my team, which was at one point, I think 11 people, is now 2. And that's like across the board, like the kind of like massive layoffs they did. And so I don't work there anymore. I was laid off as part of that. But yeah, I did first I was working in advertising at a large, the biggest ad agency in the world, FCB. And I was working there. I got laid off from there. And then The Onion picked me up, and I worked there for 3 years, and that was great.
And what were you doing? What was your like expertise throughout those years at the advertising agency and then going to The Onion?
I was a copywriter at the ad agency, and I was the only copywriter in my particular division, which was the experiential arm, which is like basically anything that's not a print ad or a TV commercial, like anything that you engage with live. So things that will never happen again, thanks to this virus. That kind of stuff was the stuff that we planned. So I was I was a pure creative. Most people on the team were logistics and, stuff of that nature, planners and, budget people and account people and logistics. And then my job was basically to come up with ideas and then like write them out in a very sort of clean way. And then also I would write like tweets for brands and stuff like that. And so when I went to The Onion, they had a division called Onion Labs, which was like kind of an ad agency, but with the understanding that it was going to be funny and like it would kind of make fun of your brand a little bit, but it would still ultimately be like, you want Onion writers to write you your commercial? Here you go. That was what it is basically. Yeah. And so, which was cool because it was the job at The Onion where you made money. So that was good, and so I wrote, I pitched and wrote ads and wrote scripts and would cast the ads or cast the commercials and then was on set to do rewrites and assistant direct and all that kind of stuff. So it was a great job. I really, really loved it. It was like, as far as having a job that's not being in a band, it was like, I'd be very surprised if I ever have a job that I enjoy that much again.
With writing ads and being on set, is that not usually something that people need a lot of experience for?
Well, I did go to film school.
Right.
And I also had worked in an ad agency, in like a straight ad agency as a copywriter for like 3 or 4 years before that. And then I also had the Nihilist Arby's thing. So it was like, I had like my fucking like humor chops proven, and, you know, being able to work in an ad environment that was proven. And then also, you know, I knew my way around a film set. So it wasn't, it was very fortunate for me. I mean, it actually did kind of play into like, yes. My resume before I started working at the first ad agency was drank beer in a van for 25 years, you know? But this actually happened to be a job I was suited to do.
Amazing. Yeah. And there are some marketing skills that you're going to come, you know, you've been marketing your band for that long.
Yeah, but you know what, man? That is bullshit because nobody cares. You know, you put that shit on a resume and it's like, so drank beer in a van for 25 years. Got it. You know, you could be like, oh no, I was in charge of all the design and, you know, I negotiated all these different deals and people are like, okay, so drank beer in a van. Yeah, got it. And you know, the fucking weird, sad truth is people in advertising are some of the most uncreative, cowardly people on earth. So they're going to take a chance on you. No, they're so uncreative and cowardly that they're like, you know, cops are in the news. Kendall Jenner's in the news. Let's have her hand a cop a Pepsi. You know, that seems like a safe bet. And it's like, that's how clueless they are and uncreative and fuck it, you know, and that was a disaster, you know, but it's like all they needed was one actual living, breathing person with a fucking pulse and a heart to be like, no, I know, I don't think you should do that. And that would have been avoided. But instead it's like all this fucking bullshit committee, fucking cowardly oneism that goes on in there, you know, and fucking.
I really appreciate you chatting to this. I feel like you've got so many good stories and stories for days, you know, so maybe we could do another one in the future.
I'd be happy to. Anytime, man.
Cool. Thank you so much, Brendan.
Thanks, man. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.